The soaring spires of the Jagannath temple in Puri represent one of the most significant architectural achievements in the ancient world. For centuries, this site has functioned as a massive global epicenter of devotion. Its cultural gravity is staggering. During major festivals, millions of people converge here, filling the streets to pull colossal wooden chariots and an ancient display of collective faith. Yet inside this heavily fortified and intricately carved sanctuary, the primary objects of worship look remarkably different from what a visitor might expect. While most historical temples in India feature statues sculpted with anatomical precision, the deities here are massive, block-like wooden figures that completely lack hands and feet. Beyond the unusual form of the gods, the temple itself occupies a precarious piece of geography. It stands directly on a hostile coastline battered by the Bay of Bengal, an ocean with a long history of generating surges that can swallow entire coastal cities. The existence of these handless gods and the survival of the stone walls protecting them are the enduring artifacts of a legendary struggle between divine intervention and the raw power of the sea. The origin of the site begins in the period following the death of Lord Krishna. Lore states that his remains were placed inside a waterproof wooden box and set adrift on the open ocean. This box traveled a vast distance. Starting from the western coast of India, the currents carried it across the sea to the opposite side of the subcontinent. The relic eventually washed ashore on the eastern beaches of Odisha. A local ruler, King Indrayubna, received a divine command in a dream to retrieve these remains and build a grand temple to house them. The king immediately began construction. However, every time the walls took shape, the ocean surged inland, smashing the masonry and pulling the debris back into the depths. After repeated failures, the king's resources were drained and his willpower was broken. He reached a point where he was ready to abandon the holy mission entirely. At this stage, human devotion and traditional engineering had reached their limit, unable to overcome the destructive force of the rising tides. The narrative shifts with the arrival of a mysterious saint, described in the tradition as Kabir Sahib Ji in disguise. He claimed he could stop the water, but only if the king built a specialized platform on the shoreline. Once the platform was built, the saint took his seat upon it, and the tides began to repel. For the first time, the ocean remained at bay, allowing the temple's stone walls to be finished and secured. With the temple built, the king attempted to have idols carved for the inner sanctum, but every sculptor's tools shattered against the wood. Kabir Sahib Ji reappeared to take on the task, this time walking into the temple disguised as an elderly carpenter. Working behind locked doors, the carpenter carved the deities, but intentionally stopped before adding hands or feet. Despite their appearance, these specific figures were ordered to be installed on the altar. They became the permanent residents of the inner sanctum. These incomplete forms were a deliberate choice by the carpenter, fulfilling a divine design rather than reflecting a lack of skill or time. The conflict with the sea reached a climax when the water made one final massive surge to destroy the finished temple and its new deities. Kabir Sahib Ji stepped out to face the waves, commanding the forces of nature to halt their advance. The ocean relented, agreeing to pull away from Puri. However, legends state this energy had to go somewhere. The sea pivoted, eventually swallowing the remaining parts of the ancient city of Dwarka instead. This pact ensured that the Jagannath temple remained dry and protected. Today, the temple still sits on that same shoreline, standing firm against the tides that once threatened to erase it. The building's location and the deity's lack of limbs serve as the lasting physical markers of this story. They remain as a visual record of how, according to the legend, miraculous intervention finally shielded a king's work from the unstoppable forces of the ocean.